Hello everyone, I am Tippeswamy BM, Assistant Professor of English at Government First Aid College, Chitrahalli, Chitradurga District. So, in this session, we will be focusing to analyze W.B. Yeats's poem, The Second Coming. So, there is one important objective of this session, that is to make a close reading of this poem, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. When I say close reading, we will be analyzing the poem line by line and trying to understand various implications the words and the lines have in this poem. So, at the end of this session, students will be able to analyze and understand the poem line by line, that is after making the close reading of this poem. So, let me not go deep into the introduction about the poet W.B. Yeats, because I have already done that in my earlier session. So, what I will be doing that I will straight away look into this particular poem, The Second Coming. Let us look into a brief background about the poem. This poem was written in the year 1919. So, you should be very specific, or as a student, please focus towards the year. It was written in the year 1919 after the end of First World War and making it part of the modernist period. So, this poem, it was written after the First World War in the year 1919, and you can also see that it belongs to a particular period of English literature known as modernist period, and the literature which was produced during this period was known as modernist literature. So, before we proceed, let me explain in brief what is this modernist literature, or what is modernism in literature. Modernism is an aesthetic response to modernity in literature. So, when I say it is an aesthetic response, during the earlier part of 20th century, there were two types of responses towards modernity, because we see 20th century as the beginning part of modern world. So, regarding the aesthetic response to modernity, there were two types. One was euphoric, the other one was dyspeptic. There were few writers who were happy with the aspects of modernity, who celebrated modernity, who welcomed modernity in a positive light, whereas the other writers, they looked into modernity as a kind of threat to human existence. So, that is what we see in most part of existential literature, which is also a significant part of modernist literature. So, this particular poem, The Second Coming, it also belongs to this period known as modernist period. Another important aspect about this poem, that it uses the Christian imagery, the biblical Christian imagery, to describe the atmosphere of post First World War Europe. So, it uses the Christian imagery. As you can see, the title itself is The Second Coming. So, it has a reference to Bible, where we understand or we look into the aspect of Jesus Christ coming and rescuing the world, and at the same time there is another belief that he will visit again the second time. But here W.B. Yeats uses the title very cautiously, whether this second coming happens for to safeguard the mankind or for the destruction of the mankind. That is what we have to see when we read the poem. The other important reference about the poem is W.B. Yeats's book, which he has written. The title of the book is A Vision, which describes a universal system of cyclical birth based around a turning gyre. Gyre refers to spherical circles. It starts at one particular point in the center, and as it proceeds it goes on increasing its perimeter and reaches a point where the center cannot reaches the last circle. So this is very significant to understand this particular poem. And regarding the speaker or the narrator or the speaker in the poem, the speaker in the poem seems to be very much prophetic, that he has a prophecy to tell that the second coming, surely the second coming is at hand, but we are not sure for what reason. And the tone is very much pessimistic. He is not happy with the state of affairs in the modern world, and you can very much understand it in the lines. So let us dwell into the poem, The Second Coming, by W.B. Yeats. The first two lines of the poem, they give us an imagery, okay, where we have to visualize an image, and let me explain it after reading out these two lines. The first two lines are, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Okay. So you have two important references over here. The first one is of a falcon bird, and the second one is that of a falconer, a person, a human being, and the art of falconry. The art of falconry refers to a falconer. He trains his falcon bird in such a way that that bird listens to the commands of his master. But here W.B. Yeats, when we talk about the 20th century in this modern world, which is torn by war and other aspects of modernity, what is happening, that this falcon bird, it is turning and turning. Yes, it is turning. Yes, this is something very natural to the bird. Okay. But what happens here, that this bird turning and turning in the widening gyre, yes, it reaches such a distance, it flies to such a distance where the falcon, this bird, is not able to hear the commands of the falconer. Something very unusual, because it is the custom that falcon should listen, should hear the commands of the falconer, its master. But what is happening today, that things are going out of hand, things are going out of control, that falcon bird is not hearing its master. So the poem opens with this mysterious metaphor, a falconer who searches for his lost falcon, which has flown in a widening gyre. The image of the falconer, that is the human losing control over his surrounding environment, which is being represented by the falcon bird, which I have already explained, symbolizes this shift from one phase of history to the next, that it is a very important reference that we are moving towards a new world. The earlier world no more exists today. We are into a modern world where individual is losing control over his own existence, or you can also see that humanity is losing its control. So now the poem has introduced the readers to its central premise of a loss of control, and this loss of control is that of humanity over its civilizations. Okay. So the first two lines are very, very significant to understand that we are looking into a situation where modern world is full of chaos, is full of uncertainty, where things are not under one's control. As the poem continues, we look into the next three lines. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, and the blood-dimmed tide is loosed. These are very significant lines in the poem. As we already know that turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things are going out of hand. Yeats makes it more clear in the next line when he straight away tells that things fall apart. So what is happening, that things are falling apart. This is a very significant line. You must also know that this is the title of a famous novel, Things Fall Apart, by Chinua Achebe. where W.B. Yeats says, in this modern world, things are falling apart. And the center cannot hold. So what is this center? Center may refers to the values and morality in mankind. But unfortunately, this center cannot hold things today. So everything is falling apart. So nothing is under control. So things are falling apart. And what you see everywhere, mere anarchy. Okay, anarchy is, it's a very significant word. Situation where things are not in an ideal or a utopian state where, okay, so here mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Entire world, what you see, you don't see anything sensible. You don't see people behaving properly. It is full of anarchy. Anarchy, it is a word which has different connotations. Anarchy refers to a state where you have oppression. Anarchy refers to a state with full of dictatorial attitude. Anarchy also refers to a state where people have no respect towards one another. So that is the kind of world we are living in today. And what you see, the blood dimmed tide is loosed. Everywhere you see a tide. The world is surrounded by a tide, a flood, a storm, and this tide is full of blood. Blood dimmed tide, it's a very strong reference to the bloodshed resulted in the world war. What you see everywhere, that the world is surrounded by blood. Here Yeats is referring that we are all guilty. Our hands are smeared with blood. We are all responsible for this bloodshed. People have lost their lives in this war. So he says, the blood dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere what we see, that blood is surrounded this world. So here let me read out some important lines. I know references I have included over there. The much quoted line 3, that is things fall apart and the center cannot hold. Expand on the first two lines, that is image of losing control. And the center cannot hold, it suggests that things are merely on the verge of collapse. So everything is falling down. So something unusual which is happening, which is not something seen so far in this world. The very beginning of modern world has seen that we are on the verge of collapse. It is because of maybe the corrupt mindset, the loss of morals, or the cruel mind of people living in this particular historical period. So mere anarchy has now been let loose upon the world, along with a blood dimmed tide. It is reference to the end of the World War I, which has killed millions of people. Yes, and tide refers to the bloody consequences of human violence and hatred. So in the line 5, the speaker connects blood dimmed tide to a loss of innocence. This is a very important line. So what has happened, that blood dimmed tide, as I have already explained, we are all guilty. Our hands are smeared with blood. We are all responsible for this bloodshed. And what is the result of this? That it has resulted in loss of innocence in human beings. So people are no more innocent. They are all guilty of this bloodshed. So this line calls to a question whether or not this innocence ever really existed, suggesting that it is like a ceremony, a kind of show or illusion, rather than a sincere commitment to the world's goodness. So what we see here, that ceremoniously we are celebrating this bloodshed, and we have sincerely lost our commitment to the goodness of this world. Further moving, so what Yeats says, he says, everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drawn, and the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So, okay, to connect the earlier line, what has happened, that in this tide of blood, the ceremony of innocence is drawn. Already I have explained the end result of this bloodshed, that innocence is totally lost. Under the heavy strength of the stormy strength of this blood tide, the innocence in the minds and hearts of people is totally drowned. It is suppressed. No more you can see innocence in the minds of people. And the next two lines, for me personally, these are my favorite lines in this poem, where it says, "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." Beautiful lines. You can see an antithesis over there. You have these opposite terms, best and worst, and conviction and passionate intensity. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. What kind of situation we have reached? We have reached a situation where best people who are supposed to speak up, who are supposed to take actions, who are supposed to save this world, they lack all the conviction. Conviction here refers to have a desire to do something. They have lost all the conviction. The best lack all the conviction. Yes, whereas the worst are full of passionate intensity. So passionate intensity, you should not look at this particular term in a positive connotation. Here passionate intensity refers to a cruel passion for blood, that is to conquer, that is to defeat others, that is to use war as a tool and to kill people and to exert one's control over territories. So this is what we meant by passionate intensity. You all know that this was the period. It's not that soon after World War I ended that there was peace in Europe. We all see the rise of fascist ideas and fascist mindset, which is being brought into public sphere in a very strong way. So what we see here, that is what we have to understand when we read these two lines. The best lack all the convictions. People who have some morals left, who have some sense left, but what they lack is they lack conviction. They don't have any desire to do anything for common people, the good of common people, to save lives. We don't know exactly the reason. Yes, but whereas on the other hand, the worst people with so much of cruel ideas in their minds, they are full of passionate intensity. They are the ones who are coming to power, and they are the ones who are trying to rule this world. So the final two lines of the first stanza we are looking into in this particular session. These lines, they draw an antithesis between the best and the worst, as I have already explained. The mention of conviction and passionate intensity makes it clear that this antithesis refers to specifically to people, because these are human traits. Okay, so we must be aware of this particular aspect in these two lines, because we are talking about human traits. Because best and worst, we are not talking about any other abstract idea. We are talking about human traits, human behavior, the best and the worst, the conviction and passionate intensity. Because the best people lack all the courage, all the desire, all the motive of their convictions, while the worst are in their elements. Why the worst people are full of passionate intensity to rule the world, to conquer the world, and in turn it resulted in destruction of the world. So though the poem does not specify, poem or the poet does not specify what makes the people best or what makes the people worst, this is something question related to morality or moral integrity, but we may try to interpret by seeing or by looking into these lines, by analyzing or by interpreting that best people are those with some human values left, with some kindness left, who have this desire to see peace in this world, whereas the worst refers to people who are against this peaceful atmosphere, who are full of violent, passionate intensity. So by the end of this first stanza, so what we can see that the poem has created a complicated and ambiguous picture. Okay, so ambiguous here refers to something which cannot be understood very easily. Okay, through language that is actually quiet and simple and powerful. So in the first stanza, the readers are left in a situation where they see a kind of chaos, where they see a kind of uncertainty, absurdity, existential dilemma, where things are losing control. People are not able to save their lives from this blood dimmed tide. So what we see that there is a sense of fearful atmosphere in the very beginning of 20th century. So that is why I said earlier that this poem belongs to the second category of dyspeptic modernism, where they look at the aspect of modernity in a negative light. They did not celebrate it, the coming of modernity, the dyspeptic one. Okay, so dyspeptic here refers to that is rejecting or refusing the aspects of modernity, because this aspects of war, modern warfare, weaponry, these ammunitions, they are also part of the modern world. So here many modernist writers, they looked into this aspect of modernity as something threatful to human civilization. So in the first part, or in the first stanza of this poem, W.B. Yeats is suggesting this particular aspect. Okay, so we have just looked into the first stanza in this session. So you can read this poem, read the first stanza specifically, and then you will be able to understand the interpretation which I have given. Maybe I hope it will help you to understand or to make a better sense of the lines in the poem. Thank you.